The Trump administration's actions against Columbia University and Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil represent a dramatic escalation of its controversial policies targeting higher education and dissent. The events unfolded in a whirlwind of accusations, legal maneuvering, and widespread condemnation, leaving a deep mark on the landscape of academic freedom and immigration rights in the United States. The saga began with the abrupt detention of Khalil, a permanent U.S. resident and recent Columbia University graduate, on Saturday night. His arrest, described by President Trump himself as the first arrest of many to come, sent shockwaves through the academic community and beyond. Khalil, a prominent figure in pro-Palestinian activism on campus, had helped lead protests against Israeli actions in Gaza. His detention was not based on any criminal charges, but rather on a State Department order to revoke his green card, citing a provision of the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act. This act allows the Secretary of State to expel foreigners deemed to pose a potential threat to U.S. foreign policy interests. Reports indicate that Secretary of State Marco Rubio personally signed off on the arrest, relying on the aforementioned provision and claiming reasonable ground to believe that Khalil's presence in the U.S. presented potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences. This action immediately drew the ire of free speech advocates, human rights organizations, and legal experts who questioned the basis for Khalil's detention and the potential chilling effect on political activism. The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, and the Center for Constitutional Rights swiftly joined Khalil's legal team, led by attorney Amy Greer. Greer reported that Khalil was healthy and his spirits are undaunted by his predicament, offering a glimmer of resilience amidst the storm. Further amplifying the outcry, 13 members of Congress, led by Representative Rashida Tlaib, issued a letter demanding Khalil's immediate release, underscoring the deep political divisions surrounding this case. Adding fuel to the fire, the Trump administration simultaneously announced the cancellation of $400 million in federal funding to Columbia University. The administration's justification centered on the university's alleged failure to adequately protect students from anti-Semitic harassment. This claim, made amidst the backdrop of heightened tensions surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and subsequent protests, was met with strong pushback from the university and many others. Columbia has consistently faced criticism for its handling of campus protests, with some alleging disproportionate responses to pro-Palestinian demonstrations. However, the administration's actions were viewed by many as a punitive measure, intended to silence dissent rather than a genuine attempt to address antisemitism. The implications of this funding cut extended far beyond Columbia. The U.S. Department of Education's Civil Rights Office issued warnings to 60 other colleges and universities, suggesting potential enforcement actions for similar allegations of anti-Semitic harassment and discrimination. These warnings were issued under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination based on race, color, and national origin in institutions receiving federal funding. This broad-based action raised concerns about a potential chilling effect on free speech on campuses nationwide, fostering an environment of self-censorship in response to the administration's aggressive stance. The root of this escalating conflict can be traced to an executive order signed by President Trump shortly after his re-election, ostensibly aimed at combating antisemitism. However, a fact sheet accompanying the order suggested a far-reaching approach, hinting at the deportation of international students involved in pro-Palestinian protests. This sparked concerns that the order was being weaponized to suppress dissent and target specific political viewpoints. The administration's rhetoric further amplified these fears, with President Trump threatening to halt all federal funding for any college or school permitting illegal protests, and vowing to imprison agitators. Columbia University, a prominent institution known for its vibrant student activism, has been a focal point for protests against Israel's actions in Gaza. These protests, which erupted across the U.S. and globally, called for an end to U.S. support for the Israeli military and demanded divestment from companies with ties to Israel. At Columbia, such protests led to mass arrests, suspensions, and even the resignation of the university's president. The current situation reflects a continuation and intensification of this conflict, with the administration escalating its tactics to a level that many consider unprecedented and deeply alarming. The case of Mahmoud Khalil and the sanctions against Columbia University symbolize a broader trend within the Trump administration's approach to higher education and political activism. The confluence of immigration enforcement, funding cuts, and warnings to other institutions paints a concerning picture of a government increasingly using its power to stifle dissent and shape the political landscape within academic settings. The long-term consequences of these actions remain to be seen, but the immediate impact is clear. A climate of fear and uncertainty now hangs over universities across the country, raising serious questions about academic freedom, due process, and the future of political discourse within higher education. The legal battles and political fallout surrounding these events are certain to continue, leaving a lasting impact on the relationship between the government and American universities, and the rights of students and activists alike. The international implications are also significant, further straining relations with countries and organizations critical of U.S. policies towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The saga serves as a stark reminder of the delicate balance between national security concerns, immigration policy, and the fundamental principles of free speech and academic freedom.